Thank you for coming. Before we get started with the panel, we find it useful to know who we're talking to. So if you're an artist, could you raise your hand in here? Okay. If you're a gallerist or dealer, hand up. Art collector, critic, thought there was free food? No? Okay, so that gives us a little idea where we're going. We're going to try to make the briefest of self-introductions, and then we're going to try to get down to something that's a little bit more than 10 minutes each, saying how fabulous their own institutions are, which they are, and try to see if we can come up to a larger or more useful conversation about commissioning artworks, keeping in mind that it's kind of unusual because the strategy is to inform each other, which is different than most panels, but also try to inform the audience. So with that in mind, the world's briefest introductions, starting.
Very short, we know. Good evening. I'm Patrizia Sandretto Rebaudengo. First of all, I am a collector. And then 20 years ago, I established my foundation. It's a Fondazione Sandretto Rebaudengo. It's a no-profit institution. One of our aims, maybe the most important aim, is to work with the artists, to support them, to give them a space in which to show their work, and obviously to commission and producing works. And so is what we're trying to do. We in different ways. Sometimes we commission work. That means to invite an artist. We choose the artist. We invite the artist. Can be for an exhibition, or can be just for one work. It happened, for example, with just now. If you come to Turin to visit my foundation, we have an exhibition that we commissioned to a young artist, Yang Chen. It's a video artist, and this was a case in which we commissioned. Instead, other time we just are involved in the production. That means sometimes artists, I have to stop, yes, artists invite. Artists,
I'm cutting you off.
Yes, artists invite me, we invite artists, or sometimes artists ask us to commission, to produce new work.
And we'll get to those definitions.
You take it serious, literally, to cut us off. So I'm directing the Migra Museum for Contemporary Art, which is also a private space, like hers. But it's different because it's run by a company, but it's also different in a way because it's paid by the cultural percentage of the Migros. And Migros is a cooperative of this country who was shopping here, who knows it as a supermarket chain. And we have a big collection, which was founded in 1957, and the museum is young. So I'm trying to talk quick now, you see. The museum started in 1996, and we also have the same aim. We are producing most of the artworks we are showing. So that's our aim, production, commissions.
I'm Marc, Payot, Vice President and partner of Hauser and Wirth. And we are based in Zurich, Switzerland, England, in New York, and soon in LA. And we are in constant communication with institutions in terms of commissioning works. And I'm very much looking forward to see what we can discuss today.
Hello. Yeah. Good evening. My name is Benjamin Weil. I'm the artistic director of Centro Botín, an institution that is actually a project of the Botín Foundation, a foundation based in Santander, which is in the north of Spain, that has had a visual arts program for the past 20 years and is very much involved with supporting artists by providing them with grants and also supporting artists by producing work, which we eventually acquire for the collection.
That was the world's shortest set of introductions. Benjamin expected to normally wait about 3 hours before it got to that end. I think it would be useful in conversations we had that sometimes we mix up the terms between producing an artwork, which is an essential thing, and commissioning an artwork. So I don't know who would like to jump in and sort of try to define our ground before we go through what that all means. So.
But for me, commission work means inviting the artist to realize a new work. with a specific project that can be just producing, or also the work, or also, and then obviously to pay in order to do the work. But doesn't mean that the work then become part of my collection. In the case, instead of to produce a work, for me to produce a work, it's, as I said before, there are two possibilities. One is when an artist asks me to produce a work for a project, for an exhibition, just for or for me to produce a work is when we talk with director of Biennial, like Venice Biennial. We produce a lot of work. We just was talking before. We produced the work of Ragnar Kart and so on 2 years ago. Now we're working with the Istanbul Biennial, and we will produce some work like Ed Atkin for the Istanbul Biennial. So it's.
Well, Marc, I bet you have a different perspective as to between the definition of producing and commissioning.
Well, the image you just see there is a sculpture by Monika Sosnowska, which we produced in our New York space. And I think the differentiation between production and commissioning is clearly that when you produce, you support that work in many cases, not necessarily with a commercial idea. Images before were, for example, on Christoph Büchel's community project in London, but it is a clear, completely different approach from commissioning, which is based on an invitation from a curator or a director of an institution or a collector who specifically, in dialogue with the artist, invites to create a work which then is for that specific situation. Not necessarily that it then becomes part of the collection. Example of the Aspen Art Museum, who is not a collecting institution, commissioned Martin Creed to do Everything Is Gonna Be Alright, a huge, large neon for the museum. And it will obviously not be in their collection, as there is no collection, but it is commissioned, and they pay half of the production, and we do. So I think it's an important
But I would still
distinction.
say you're producing a work there, because would you say that commissioning means owning?
No, not at all. But for me, the word commissioning it's a term which comes from the States.
So it's a language issue.
It's a language issue, because when I talk to European colleagues, it was always like we are producing work, and commissioning was always like, what is it? What is really the difference? No one was so sure. For me, it's a language term.
For you, it's the same?
No, I understand your differentiation, but commissioning for me has more to do with the ego thing. Commissioning is not, for you, it sounds very gentle. It's like, I'm inviting an artist, I give an artist a free space, and he can do whatever he wants. But commissioning for me always meant, especially because it comes from the US, it's my brand. It's brand Migra Museum for Contemporary Art. And if I invite an artist to do something, I don't brand it. It's the property of the artist, unless I buy it. I don't brand things, even if we spend a lot of money.
Benjamin, I'll weigh in last on it.
I would be inclined to think that when you have a specific project in hand, I mean, like for instance, if I produce an exhibition and I invite an artist to produce the project, I would call it a commission, in that there's a specific frame in which this is about to happen. Whereas production may be more like supporting work, but not necessarily being involved in its development or in its showing. Maybe that's how I would look at it. I mean, for instance, Botín Foundation supported the John Jonas Pavilion in Venice, like many other institutions, obviously. It's production money. Or when we provide grants to young artists to produce new work, it's the same thing. You know, it's not a commission. Whereas if we invite an artist to do a project for our space, for instance, I think this in this case is a commission. But I'm not so comfortable with the
term.
Difference,
If you think you commissioned a portrait, that's kind of a clear one side, because no one else wants a picture. Who would want to picture a painting of Josh Baer except, you know?
Well, if it's painted by the right person, you
Baer,
never know.
there is one of me, by the way, in the fair by Eric Fischel, but versus production is a good term in terms of thinking of a movie, that there's this elaborate team that's all working to the same end line. So maybe that's why it's a language barrier. But you don't see that the ownership issue at the beginning is a distinction between what you're doing?
Just one thing. When you commission, you invite. When you produce, you don't invite, maybe.
When you, to my mind, if you produce it, we have that work, and once it's made, then we figure out what's going to happen to it, whether you keep it, somebody else buys it, the artist does it, it doesn't exist forever. To my mind, that's producing, which is probably the most important thing that your institutions and galleries do, because without that, the work would never exist. So it's an essential thing. Commissioning is still, to my mind, is more about ownership.
So you buy also, became your work when you commission a work or not?
You would. In an American's language, that would be clear, wouldn't it, Marc?
And you?
So a commission would be, I ask an artist to produce a new piece which I intend to purchase for my own collection, whether I'm a private or a public institution.
Yes.
But not necessarily you buy. Not necessarily you buy.
Sometimes it fails.
So that was my next thing to move sideways. Language aside, if everybody could sort of by name or not say your best experience and your worst experience, you can name the artists or the galleries or the institutions where it really worked and when it didn't work, but keeping in mind what we might learn from that experience.
I don't know if you can learn from it, but for example, where it fails or where it failed, we did 2 years ago a big production with Geoffrey Farmer in the museum, and it was like a 500 meter square stage on 50-meter length with about 50 sculptures on top of it, which had been kinetic. And there was a whole programming which should have run during the whole opening hours. It should have been the beginning of life and ending of life of Frank Zappa. What I said, it should have been. We produced it, or commissioned it, however you call it, but it was never finished during. It was running in Zurich, and what I often do when I commission something, I'm actually trying. When I know I like it, I'm buying the concept. So I've never know what the result of the artwork is in the end, but I buy it way before it exists, just from the idea. And the gallery was hesitating, and I understand now why, because she knew how crazy Geoffrey Farmer is, and that this work is a process of, let's say, of creation of 3 years. That it's a non-end process, and I think production money which went in there, I think they're up to minimum 400,000, 500,000, 600,000 by now. I have no idea how much they want to spend or how much they need if they sell it. But it's like, for example, it was impossible to acquire it because even before they wanted too much, but it would have been not enough.
Your most successful experience?
It was, but it's from the artwork. It's like The Visitors from Ragnar Kjartansson. It's a very famous piece by now. We reopened the museum with it 3 years ago. And it was also like, I was sitting with him at a coffee in Berlin, and he just had this idea, and he was putting it out to do this film in this old villa in upstate New York. In every room, a different musician, and so it's a 9-channel video installation. But like the idea was rough. And I said, like, yeah, it's great. And it's like, oh, but we need to produce it. It costs money. I said, like, it's easy. I get one version of it. But we had no idea what comes out. Nor the artist always. And this became the most successful installation of the artist. If you see the collectors who bought this one, it's like, or museums, it's like from Guggenheim to, well, whatever. It's
Benjamin,
best
best and worst, and why? Or how?
Best, I think, is when I was working at SF MoMA, invited Christian Markley to do new work. Actually, he's the one who suggested it. I came to him to say, I want to do a show with you, and he said to me, yeah, good, but I want to do a new work. I said, okay, fine. So we produced a piece called Video Quartet, which was a multi-channel installation that was synchronizing images with the soundtrack that went with them and sort of creating both a visual and oral experience, which was really very, very compelling. And this work was produced in an edition of 6, and within a matter of 2 weeks after the show opened, it was included in absolutely every major museums in the United States, including then the Tate Gallery, which wanted to buy one. And I don't know, I think to me it was a turning point in Christian's career as well. So I think it was very successful in being able to provide artists with support at a moment where really he needed it, and the right support.
And the
worst,
worst?
I can't think of anything that went really bad. I was thinking, was raking
You're
my
not
head,
trying
and I've
hard
been doing
enough.
quite a lot. No, I think that most of the experiences I had were actually quite positive. You know, I'm thinking about SF MoMA, which has been a lot of work, including a Pipilotti Risk, which was co-produced with Hauser and Wirth at the time. Thinking about works that I did for Hermès, the foundation, which commissioned this project called H-Box. I don't know if any of you saw it. I traveled around the world with works that I was commissioning every year. And that was also okay. So I think, no, I don't
Patrizia,
have any
maybe?
bad experience.
I can say the same. I didn't have some projects that I say horrible to work. Obviously, every time is so different. For example, one of the experience, maybe because it's the last one, but was really good and interesting, was with Yan Chen, this American artist, and we commissioned, in this case, and we produced a trilogy, and we just have now in Fondazione the first episode of this trilogy, and it was so fantastic, to work on the concept that he started from this project, an algorithm, and then he decided that he created the characters, and then the characters now they do what they want. So if you come to see this work, you see not what was yesterday, not will be tomorrow. And so it was so interesting to work in this concept with him. And if I have to say, was really a good project. And what can be wrong, what can be difficult in this project, like in all the projects, is a problem of time. Now these artists are so busy, so many projects, that we just opened the exhibition of Yan Chen, and he asked me, can we open tomorrow? It was the day of the opening, So what is very difficult for me now is time more than. And so I cannot say one project that I say was a disaster. Yes, not always is easy. We did, for example, a project, we commissioned an exhibition in 2011 for 150 years of Italy. We invite, Italy is divided in 20 regions. We invited 20 artists from all over the world to visit the region, and then we gave the money to produce a work. And obviously it was quite difficult to put together 20 artists from all over the world. It was during the biennial, so it was quite difficult. And we had some problem then because we didn't write any draft, any contract. So it was very difficult when some of them we didn't decide not to buy, and they were very disappointing, and was really a big problem. And for that I say maybe it's time also to think to find a way to make a contract or to write something, because sometimes, yes, if you don't define so well, then you can have some problem with some artists.
In preparation for this, I asked my team which are the projects which didn't work, because I had problems to find some, and we couldn't really figure out projects which really failed. And I think what's important is that when you get to a commissioned artwork, it's all based on the communication between the institution, the collector, and the artist. And we as a gallery facilitate that, and with experience can help them avoid that it goes wrong. And really, we couldn't find really ways where it went completely wrong. We had many successful commissions. For example, the Centre Pompidou invited Pipilotti Risk with a work called À la Belle Étoile, which is a projection from the top of the museum onto the square, and which at night you walk onto the video. That was definitely a very rewarding and successful piece for her.
Well, as a reformed gallerist who had one for 10 years, who had the fortune and misfortune to work with the late Chris Burton, I can tell you that the issues that I could see come up is what happens when the $100,000 budget becomes $3 million? What happens when instead of I'm not ready tomorrow, I'm not ready for 5 years and I'm in for $3 million? And what happens if it's not so good? and you bought it. I mean, we're sort of giving his rosy picture, but amongst you all, it's like, do you call each other? It's like, what do I do now? Or is there a little list of artists to stay away from? That, I mean, aren't those what happens sometimes? Maybe not to you, but to others?
If you collect contemporary art, you never know about tomorrow. You never know about the importance of any artist.
Yeah, but
tomorrow.
if an artwork's completed, you know that it's there. If it's a
Completed,
vision.
yes, but it's still, you don't know about the value of the artist. You don't know how he's ending up in 10 or 20 or 30 years.
Of course not, but if the cost of production, they say, like, I want to do this thing, it's going to cost me 100,000 Swiss francs, and it'll be ready in January, and it's now January 2018, and we spent 2 million Swiss francs. Isn't that, or you want to be in that situation? You seem smiling. It's
No, it's not so easy. No, it's not. No, I understand. It's not always easy. But I think that, in fact, I understand that every occasion, every commission, is different. So you cannot find a rule in order to have a contract, an agreement. So every time you have to talk with. First of all, what I want to say that all the times that I commission or that I produce a work, I always obviously talk with the artist regarding the artistic part of the project, but all what is an economic part, I always deal with the gallery. And this for me has always been important, and I think that we have to work in this way because you are so important too. So we cannot just have even if we don't buy, but maybe sometimes, yes, I didn't buy, as I said before, but what I'm trying to do always to work regarding the economic deal with the gallery.
Well, I think you can work, you can discuss this very differently with the gallery, and a lot of artists don't really want to, or are not that great at that, right? When it comes to numbers and how much something is and what that all means. So the idea is one thing, then to put that into a budget is another one, and then to hold the budget, and that it's then not double and triple is obviously
exactly. So this
difficult.
has always been important for me, yes.
Yeah.
You too? Do you work with the gallery too?
Of course, it's important for us. I mean, that's why I mentioned the project of Jeffrey Farmer, because that was really getting out of the hand of the artist. It was much more expensive.
And if you've done a project that's public and you're dealing with the government, of whether it's a totally other thing where these problems are magnified to much larger extents. I don't, Benjamin?
Well, one thing that comes to my mind is I've always had the feeling that when I was working with the artists, and most cases with the gallery, that the idea of a mutual trust was absolutely essential. And I think that the reason why I can't think of any failures is that at any times when there's this system, this ecology that's being built, that there's always one person to sort of watch on the other. I mean, it's like there's this kind of auto-regulating situation that sort of occurs because nobody wants a failure, obviously. Everybody wants the success. So I think if the three parties work together hand in hand, usually the result is quite good. Maybe better, maybe not as good, but I don't think that I can think of, that's why I can't think of any really bad
Marc, have you
experience.
guys done public commissions where it's the city of Atlanta or the government of Sweden or something, and that works differently?
Well, for example, Martin Creed got invited for a staircase in Edinburgh, which is all different kind of marbles he could find, and it's about 250 different stones going up, and that's the city of Edinburgh commissioning that piece. And it's not really different. You have a responsible person there, you have the gallery, you have the artist, and it doesn't just get out of control. I mean, you have then a budget, what that could be, and then if it gets more, then that's discussed or stopped. I mean, we didn't experience that.
But it is still different than at that point the artist comes to you and say, oh, I need another 10,000 euros. You're going to say, okay. The city of Edinburgh is not going to say, okay. So your position as private foundations is very different than almost all the commissions. Think of all that bad public art all around the world. That's very different than what you all are doing. And there's a reason for it. why it's
But
bad.
what we often do is like, well, let's say we trade an artwork. So for example, also if we stay with the same example to make it literal, with Jeffrey, so it's like I said, like we spent so much production money and I can't acquire the piece because it's out of budget and out of our budget. But what can we do? And he produced a new work for us, which is going back now to the collection. So this is like, it's also kind of an exchange. If we spend so much money that we get something back.
Well, that becomes part of the last part I want to go to before questions is like, what sort of solutions can you offer each other for how to make this process more consistent and better? One example is if the artist goes out of control, I can't afford it, can he make something else for us? Or what would you like to ask your colleagues here?
But it's still the same. I mean, we give the full trust because, I mean, I gave him quite more production money than we usually have. But also, like, when he said, like, yeah, I will give you something back of this value, I mean, I didn't know what it is. I still don't know. I still haven't received it.
No, it's not easy, even because it happened many times that the projects, or even for us that we are small, we are from private foundation, we don't work with a government. It happened that we start with a budget and the budget change, yes, during the time. And you cannot say to the artist, stop it, because maybe it's true. If you put more money and if you change the project day after day, it's better, no? It's growing, and so you have to say, yes, I follow. But this is not easy. But sometimes I think we can try to have a contract in which we try to write some point. But I think that it's not so easy to find a way not to have a formal agreement that you can use.
Marc, do you always have a contract, and does it save you from problems? Or can it be loosey-goosey a little bit?
Not necessarily a written contract, but there is for sure an understanding. And I think it's difficult in the sense that every single case is different. The artist is different, the space is different, the institution is different, the budget. So
is there any standards that we can try to set amongst you all that helps with that? You were hoping for some sort of, Benjamin, resolution of some sort?
Well, resolution, I mean, in such a small amount of time, I think it would be very difficult to attain. But definitely, I think that laying the grounds for sharing experience meaning, you know, being able to possibly, I mean, I was thinking along the lines of, you know, there is a, it's got nothing to do with production, although it's got to do with collection care and restoration and conservation issues. It's a project that was initiated by 4 institutions. It's SF MoMA, it's MoMA New York, it's Tate London, and it was initiated by a couple of collectors called Pamela and Richard Kramlicks, who are very big collectors of video. The initiative is called Matters in Media. And the idea was to sort of like put all the information that can be put together in order to start putting together a collection care policy for media works. I'm using this because I think it's really interesting as an idea to sort of like say, okay, there is maybe a way to create some kind of a database of sorts, where in which a number of institutions that agree to collaborate to this can share information about the development of a project, how things go right, go wrong, and so on and so forth, and then link to the next step, which is eventually when you have a very large project or very ambitious projects financially, to be able to sort of find partners, to be able to produce something more ambitious without having to go really way away from, you know, what you can afford to do as an institution. And I think that these are issues that I'd be interested to see come forward. And then I think that, you know, the issue of ways in these institutions, whether private or public, can sort of try and find grounds to work with galleries. In the case of acquisitions and in the case of non-acquisitions, you know, is there a way, for instance, that there is an agreement that is made that if an institution spends money, and particularly an institution that's a public institution, can recuperate the investment that it's made in supporting the production of a new work. It's not always possible, obviously, but I think that if there are ways to sort of start laying those grounds, it would be really very interesting and good.
If you could all weigh in on that, and then we'll open it for
No,
questions.
and it's very interesting to start to think, to work together. Also, for example, I'm in a committee in the Philadelphia Museum, and we were talking with Carlos Basualdo, and the idea is to start to work for film, video, to work together, to produce, to commission and produce together work, because this can be the right direction. And I saw that some museums now also they start to buy together, to share works of art. So I think that this we could do more and more, because could be the right direction to support important, because video obviously not painting, but with video, with some kind of work, it could happen quite often. You should think to do something in this direction.
I actually would add one thing very quickly is like, for instance, in the example of working with Carsten Höller, we're preparing an exhibition for the opening of our new building next year. And we've co-produced work with Francesca Thyssen. We've co-produced work with the Hayward Gallery. We are probably going to co-produce the work with Hangar Bikoka. And this is really important that we managed to do that, because then we can actually do a show that's far more ambitious than if we were just putting our own production money into the whole project.
But I think it is quite then common sense that in case the work doesn't remain with you and is sold to somebody else, that then you get the money back of the production. I mean, I think this is pretty standard, right? That's one standard which we could say when you produce something and it doesn't remain in the institution, you should get the money back.
Well, but that's the difference between providing a grant to an artist. If you provide a government grant or foundation grant, it's spend it as you will. It's not coming back. So, again, every situation is unique to some degree.
But it's not, I think it's a differentiation if you, in that sense, commission/produce, or it is an exhibition budget. That's a different story, right? You ship, you create, you whatever. That's not being recuperated, but the actual work which is produced, commissioned, might be.
You could have the last word, and then we'll open for questions.
I can only agree with that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Question, and when you get a microphone, identify yourself either by name or I'm an artist, I'm a collector, or I'm a whatever. That would be helpful, please.
Hi, I'm Jason, I'm curator, and my question is, I actually agree very much about branding and ownership as for commission, but I wonder if you have a different definition for commission as in the purpose of this piece of art. That's my question.
I'm not sure what you mean by, maybe if you could explain what you mean by purpose, we might be able to, they might be able to answer it.
Oh, okay, because in my opinion, I do feel that besides branding and having ownership of the work, but also I feel the word commission has an underlying meaning of having a specific function or purpose of this artwork. For example, you commission a piece of work for a specific exhibition that has something to do with a specific subject or in relation to the artist's practice.
I think you answered your question yourself with your last sentence. Yes, the commission is, like if you invite someone, it's either for a content because you do a group show, or it's like a solo show and you work on something together which is specific for the space.
Or it's for over the couch. That's a commission too. Another question?
Hello, my name is Stefan Köhler. I'm independent curator here with George Adiakbo, helping him for a site-specific installation. I wonder, to what extent does the elasticity of the budget depend on the way the artist's personality and his way to articulate? I've been working on many projects with James Lee Byers, and I witnessed many situations where production of marble pieces went more and more expensive. Michael Werner was going crazy, but he insisted in such an articulate and very poetic way that in the end the work was realized. So what is your experience of the artist's way of articulating themselves, of their needs?
It's a nice word, poetic insistence.
Elasticity was good too. Anybody? I mean, I think that no one's jumping in, so I'll try to rescue everybody. I mean, some people are more charming than others. Some people are more attractive than others, and we all have different opinions as to who those might be. It's not necessarily fair.
It's interesting. I don't think I can think of any experience where production went over budget. When it was looking like it was going to go over budget, always managed to find a partner to sort of co-produce it.
You never
with
met
me.
Chris Burden, let me tell you.
No.
That's why my hair is gray. Do we have another question in the front? Here's the mic.
Maria Veronica, the artist who represents Ecuador in the Biennale of Venice. I'm very curious about the contract. I imagine every single experience, depending on the projection, the dimension of the work, special circumstances are unique. But since you have this particular, also not always very good experience, have you thinking to make a special contract? In what frame? What could be the right thing about time, especially time, that seems to be a problem?
In the end, if you talk about time, if you do a contract and the artist is not ready, we stay with the same subject I had, Jeffrey Farmer. What can you do? A contract doesn't help you. The only thing a contract helps you is like to clarify each position. But in the end, I mean, if you don't want to go to a lawyer, it doesn't help you at all. And normally, we don't try to go anywhere. We try to find an agreement.
Well, I think you rightfully say that about any way. It's a good way to codify the understanding of you said, you meant.
No, we try, but it's not always easy. And then every case is different. And then how can you say, yes, if you have to spend more of time, you need more time, you cannot say now. So you try, but what I have to say that often also the gallery, not you, but many galleries, they don't want, they say, but we don't need, we can work together. So it's quite difficult, at least for me, because maybe for a museum it's easier because a museum is strong and so on, but for a foundation like mine, it's not easy to find a way to have a contract. It is not easy, even as I said, about this problem, I don't talk with the artist, I talk with the gallery. But even in this case, just today, because we have a project for the next month, and I went to the gallery here, and I say, why we don't do? And say, yes, if you want, yes, but no. So there is not the attitude, there is not so. It's something new that maybe we have to find a way. Maybe we should find a way. This could be the beginning of the way to work in this direction. But
I think the contract is essential in the sense, regardless if it's written or not, but it's essential because you manage expectations. You in which time frame? What is the budget? Who are the partners? What does the gallery get? What's the fee for the artist? What's, where could be the issues? And that is discussed, put on paper in an email or in a proper contract. And yes, if it goes wrong, it's not really going to help, but it's an essential part of the project.
Well, what's interesting about this question, we talked about this backstage a little bit, is that one element not on the stage is we don't have an artist. So this is an artist seeing the need for protection of some sort in either a specific way or an intuitive way. And we've left that part of the equation, as many panels do, not having the artist there.
Yeah.
I mean, your job is to protect them, but
yeah,
it's still a different thing.
So for example, what we try to do is to separate the financial part of the actual production of the work and the fee of the artist. That's two different things. And I think then the artist is protected in the sense that not the whole fee of the artist goes into the production, but that they get something.
Can we have unless you have something to say, another question?
Just one last one. With more and more institutions and private people commissioning new artworks that are more ambitious and outside of the regular scope of the artist practice, then what happens when down the road someone commissions a work and then they decide they want to sell it, and then we have all these artworks that are commissioned, in the market, and they're may be different than what the artist would make if they weren't being commissioned to make these things. Are we creating a new kind of artwork that's out in the world in the secondary market, or?
Why would it be very different from selling a work? I mean, it's a matter of scope and scale, or I mean, because
Maybe.
I think, you know, the chance that somebody who produces a work to include it into its collection would resell it. In the case of an institution like, you know, whether it's a private or a public museum, are probably less strong than if somebody goes and buys something, quote unquote, off the shelf, which is probably deemed easier to sort of like, you know, resell in case of whatever, for whatever reason.
So
I don't know.
maybe-
I'm not sure
Yeah,
what
maybe
you're trying to
is
say.
commissioning something more about philanthropy and producing something more about sharing the financial aspects, and then it will become part of the market.
Yeah, I don't see a difference from I mean, this work is then completed, is in a certain context, and can be traded if, you know, if that is something which is in the nature of the work, or who owns it. I don't really see a difference.
Thank you.
May I ask a question? May I ask to you, when you produce a work and then you don't buy, you decided that you don't buy, what happened to this work? Because, for example, for me, when sometime happened that I produce, and then I didn't buy the work, and I gave back to the artist and to the gallery. If they sell the work, do you ask money back, or you don't do that? I don't do that. When I produce and the work become part of the, go to the artist, what are you doing in this
my
case?
experience from many different institutional caps that I've been wearing while I've been involved with production is that you may want to get an agreement, but that it's never concretized. Meaning the work that's being produced cannot be sold, or if it's sold, it's years later and everybody forgot, or, you know, whatever. But I don't think that's, I think it's quite difficult. And, you know, it's interesting that you say that, because I'm thinking about a specific case in which the institution I work for is financing the production of an entire exhibition, which means many works, some of which the institution will not collect, but some of which are very difficult probably to sell because they are very massive, they're not the kind of things that people would buy very easily. So the gallery is saying, like, we don't want these works. We don't want to sell them because we know we can't sell them, or we don't think we can sell them. Yeah. So you can produce them if you like, but, you know. Then I was thinking, well, if I'm going to acquire work by the same artist, can I deduct the entire production of what I've produced? And the gallery says, well, no. You can only deduct the production of the piece that you're going to buy. You can't just deduct everything. And I think that this is an interesting point, because it's like, you know, okay, but if you consider the fact that, you know, the institution I work for produces many works, these many works can be exhibited again. They can be used to sort of like support the visibility of the artists, or the presence of the artists in the exhibition circuits or in the institutional world. And I think that it has a certain value, even if it doesn't have a market value. So I think it's interesting that these issues, I think, should somehow be addressed so that there are solutions that can be found that everybody's comfortable with.
I mean, it's case by case different, so it's a little difficult to generate. But I think, for example, if you would produce a whole show and you would then decide to acquire two things, so you should get a very special deal for the acquisition, so that the commission of the gallery is reduced and the commission of the artist is reduced. And then that compensates in a certain way for the non-commercial works, which then maybe one day will be sold. And so in a way the discount is, you know, is in compensation for your investment.
Of course, and I think, you know, it's only right to think about something that is making sense for all parties. And I think that, again, you know, not having to sort of like chase the gallery and the artist down in 5 years, like, oh, you sold that piece, why didn't you give me my money back? It's like, this is terrible. We don't have time for these kind of things. I think it's bad energy, and I think it's not really efficient economically either. So I think to sort of find a median way would be very interesting, in my opinion.
I'm getting a signal that we have to wrap up, so I'm The host country gets the last
no,
word.
it won't be. It's another problem because it's like I'm facing at the moment a similar problem that we're producing a show which the artwork of the artist is already there, but they collaborate every time with other people. And this collaboration, it's like with non-artists, like with scientists and whatever. And this production is enormously expensive. So actually, I spent really quite a big sum of money for the show, but there won't be produced a new artwork. So it's like, for me, it's like, what I'm doing then, I'm spent all this money, and what I'm doing with all these objects being produced, which have like actually no value. And it's like, you don't want to throw them into the garbage because it's substantial. So it's not always such a clear case. So
Well,
that was the
I would like to thank
unclear ending.
my panelists for letting me, for the first time in their lives, politely be interrupted as often and cut short so many times. I hope they recover from it, and thank you for coming.